Oh, good evening, everyone. Oh, third time's a lucky charm. So I figured tonight I would go live and just record because it's easier than recording and then uploading. And literally for a 10-minute video, it takes like an hour and 4 minutes to process because I'm in a very choppy internet area and too much back and forth with choppy internet areas. So this is just going to be under the live section. I'm going to try to like post about that on Instagram so you all know where to find this video, though I'm guessing if you're watching it, you found the video. So congratulations. So I want to go over some Monday musings that I've been having, answer some of your questions, and yeah, just treat it like a digital diary and just jump in. Okay, so welcome first and foremost. Hi, how are you? Secondly, this is being recorded on Monday, November the 13th. It's the new moon in Scorpio. It is 8:31 p.m. And so first thing I want to talk about is creep chart coincidence, and things like this happen to me quite a bit. So I don't know what to make of it, but when people ask me sometimes like, "Oh, can you manifest like really cool stuff?" I'm just like, "Well, I think it's really cool. I don't think it's very useful though." So for example, one time I was getting ready to go somewhere a few years ago, and as you know, I absolutely love Reverend Dyke, and I was listening to videos by him, and I just thought to myself, I wonder what his birth time is, you know? And I was like mid doing mascara and I turned over to my laptop, typed in like Reverend Dyke interview and changed the video. And scrolled down, like I just like whipped the scroll bar and like, phew, and clicked some random video. And it was a live interview of him, probably in the 70s or the 80s or something like that. And within the first minute, like not even minute, it was like 30 some odd seconds. He's like, "My name is Dr. Da, da, da." He's like, "I'm born the 1st of June, 1935." And then he said his birth time and where he was born. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. So I can just do stuff like so. I remember with my conspiracy theorists and astrology part two video, I had thought about people that I'd like to research who are quite conspiratorial or really deep thinkers. And I made a list on like post-it note of 5 people that just sort of came to mind throughout the day. And then I was listening to or reading about or something like that with Saturn K2 conjunctions. And the next day, I cast all the charts, and 4 out of the 5 names had Saturn K2 conjunction. And I was like, that's crazy. So, what happened was 2 days ago, or with 2 days ago, I was just letting random things play or on TikTok, something like that, and there was some old recording of a gentleman I'd never heard of called John Todd, who's now deceased, and he was giving his testimony how he was born into like a family of witches and how he always got out of trouble because they were all like connected. And he mentioned politicians and the end of times and all sorts of things like that. And just like your run of the mill, like regular conspiracies like stock up on food and buy, weapons, child sacrifice, like all that regular stuff or whatever. And he has like a pretty seedy past, like pretty gnarly. I mean, he impregnated the teenage sister of I think one of his wives or something like that. I mean, he said like just a bunch of stuff like you like probably shouldn't go there. But like this man was, just I was listening to it because I was just interested and I like old recordings. I always find like it's just like a good source of information. And I thought this morning I was having coffee and I just couldn't shake it from my mind, even though I didn't care for anything he had to say, it just didn't impress me or move me or nothing like that. And so I was like, oh, whatever. So I cast his chart and there was nothing really in there that sort of grabbed me or struck me. I was just thinking, I don't know, I just can't shake it. I looked at it again and I closed the browser. And then the third time I went, just open the chart again. And I said, there's just nothing there. Like, who cares? It's like, he was a crazy person. Like, who cares, And some part of me thought, look at the day that he died, just out of curiosity. And I normally never ever do that. I don't really do that. I just look at when they're born. And I cast the date. So I did the transits for the date, and it was November the 10th, 2007. So he was moved out of prison. He eventually went to prison for R wording a graduate student. And then I think 2 teenagers came forward. I think it was like a karate club or something. Like he was just like horrible dude. And I noticed in the chart it was a perfect sun and moon conjunction at 17 degrees in Scorpio. And I thought, no. So he died on a new moon in Scorpio. And I thought, today's a new moon in Scorpio. It just sort of like shook me. I thought that's so weird. Like it was the exact same day. So anyway, if you have nothing better to do with your time, you can go listen to him, but I really, really wouldn't. So I don't even know why I brought that up. It's just something that came to mind that I manifested. I thought that's really, really weird. But anyway, speaking of the new moon is in Scorpio today in the nakshatra Vishaka. Okay. So it's a bit interesting because Vishaka people, when they come to me, when they have ascendant Vishaka, moon Vishaka, or something, or their 10th Lord, and they say, "What should I do? What's going to happen?" More often than not, to be truthful, and if you really are truthful, it's, I don't know, something very extreme. It can go either way, and you can do your best to try to predict it. But really, these people have so much willpower that if you tell them that they won't, they might, and they probably more often than not, if they want to bad enough, then they will. And anyways, it's a very unpredictable, tumultuous, unstable, volatile nakshatra. So interestingly enough, there's a very good qualities to Vishaka as well. And I'm going to do a Vishaka deep dive on my Patreon for my patrons because they do ask me about them. I know a few of them are doing like learning very deeply. So we can talk about it there. But I will release a video this month that will cover some of it. Okay. So if you want to know a lot, it's going to be on Patreon. Anyway, new moon is in Vishaka. Moon is debilitated in Vishaka. It's debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, but more specifically, it is really, really unable to function. It's at minimum capacity, if at all, in the Vishaka and Nakshatra Vishaka. So just to kind of, and it's interesting, it is a Monday, which is like Moon Day. So maybe it has some power in that case, but and it is opposite Jupiter, isn't it? Maybe Jupiter's helping. We'll find out. I don't know. Jupiter's retrograde though, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Neither here nor there. So Vishaka is a bit scary in this sense because it's the star of people who are victorious, people who triumph. They're the unconquered. So they're conquerors, they're unbeatable, they're overcomers. So they're very intense, and they win. And so one of the lower vibrations of it is people who win at any and all costs. They exercise no tactfulness, they exercise no grace, they exercise little to no compromise or diplomacy. And they are gladly willing to trample over things to get what they want, to win. Okay. What is it? It can be a little bit Machiavellian in that the end will justify the means. So what is it really good for? In that case, it's going to be all the things that we don't consider good, which is battle and war. It's the star of fighting. Okay. So it is in the constellation of Scorpio, and the heart of the Scorpion, Antares, is like the star of war. So it's pretty intense. And today is the 13th, which is a transformational number, really significant number in the occult. I think the death card is the 13th card of the tarot, which correlates to the sign of Scorpio. So it's a very transformational new moon. And I think, like with any transformation, change can be painful for people if they can't accept certain things or if they're not willing to change. Like Louise Hay used to always say at the start of her affirmations, "I'm willing to change. I'm willing to change." So you have to be willing to change if you want to get what you want out of life and not be really affected by things. So, I mean, in a negative way. So anyways, so just look forward to, if you're on Patreon or if you're not, come join me on Patreon for more occult learning and knowledge where we can deep dive and really be ourselves. just let it rip. So I wanted to mention that. And, Scorpio is a really interesting sign. It rules chemicals. So moon is the mind. So when the moon is in Scorpio, then it can actually affect people's brain chemistry. So it can make them rather intense. It can make them hostile, and it can make them manic. Like they can be really happy. Okay. But usually they have issues with the regulating of their mood. And women too, it can affect, it can give really painful periods, issues with the endocrine system. Okay. So we could talk about this forever. But anyway, it's an interesting new moon. I just wanted to mention that. So, and it's going to be an interesting month. It's going to be a month that will bring in really intense events. So, on a personal level, of course, it depends what you have in your chart. But if you have this specific nakshatra, Vishaka, then look back as early as mid May 2022, where there was a total lunar eclipse in this lunar mansion, and to present day. So if you're Vishaka, you've kind of been going through it a bit, but Scorpio in general, because also the nodes were in Scorpio and Taurus, going through eclipses, the last one having wrapped up on the 28th of October this year in Taurus. So, oh my, I just think it's like the end of a cycle. And so sometimes some things get moved around. Like when we're moving, we throw things out, maybe unwittingly, some of us will throw away something precious and some of us might find something precious. It's really hard to tell which way it goes. But I would advise anybody who comes across this video is not to let your temper flare. Try to exercise compassion for other people and gentleness with yourself so that you don't fly off the handle and do things that you end up regretting. All right. And not to feel hopeless. That's another thing I really want to mention, is to reach for hopefulness and confidence, because Scorpio is one of the creatures that can at will take its own life. It can sting itself if it feels threatened. Okay. So much like human beings, when they feel like there's no hope and there's no way out. All right. So don't do that. It does get better, whatever it is. So try to maneuver life a little bit more tactfully, even though it goes against Vishaka nature to be tactful. You can be strategic. Okay. It's still a sign of Mars. So it's strategy. All right. Then one of the questions that I got was in regards to limerence. Perfect. And I'm sorry to the person, they asked like twice. I just keep forgetting. But limerence. Okay. So I am like Lady Limerence. Literally, that would be my pen name if I wrote love stories. And I remember all through my 20s just thinking I was just born to be lovesick. Like I don't know what it is. It just like, it doesn't suit me to be happy in relationship. I don't know what it is. And it's like, it's just overthinking, So what is limerence? Limerence is the obsession or the inability to shake someone loose from your thoughts. All right. So it can teeter, I mean, full blown stalker territory. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking to people who are obsessed in unhealthy manner, where they maybe just meet you like twice and you work at a coffee shop and they invent something in their head that you're going to get married and you're like, what? No, I just want my grande whatever. I just want my cortado or something, So, but what happens? Okay, so they ask also for an astrological kind of spin, which I will do, but I want to mention one of the things I found when I was young, two things. One is poor self-worth often leads to something like this. Hey, happy new moon, Katie. So poor self-worth, we're talking about limerence. So poor self-worth can lead to limerence, where you think, why don't you like me? And I can't like me until you like me. And it can really hurt a person's self-esteem and all this. So that can be quite tricky. But another thing I found is naivete. All right. So this was my problem. And it's kind of still is. I'm a little bit more savvy now, but bit more strategic. What a pleasant surprise. Girl, you're a pleasant surprise. Thank you. It's just, I'm having issues with internet. So I just figured it's easier to go live because it takes about an hour and 40 minutes just to upload and process a 10-minute video. So it's been stressing me out. So I just figured this is just like one and done, So, and it makes no difference because I do all my videos in one take with no editing. So I might as well just come ramble on the live. But with me, I was always like, I just didn't understand game playing and the sort of mental Olympics that people would do to buoy up their self-esteem. So I always thought, well, I have high self-esteem and I don't take things that personally. So I don't really understand, why would someone, like, for example, ask for your number and promise to take you to dinner and call you for a date and then not do it? It's just, they're literally like sucking your energy to make themselves feel good. And I was just so naive. I just thought, oh, why would someone do that? Like, that's cruel. Why would someone do that? They can't possibly hate themselves that much. And it just took me such a long time to learn that, generally people who are insecure are just generally cruel because they don't show themselves much love. So they're not going to show you much love. And this would create episodes of limerence in me where I just thought for like days on end, I was like, oh, but they're going to call. Like maybe a crocodile made its way to Canada and attacked their dog. Like I just didn't like understand that somebody could just be wicked and spineless, you know? And I would just like fixate on that. I would just fixate on that so much because and this is the thing, I suffer from positive projection where I think like, oh, I would never do that to someone intentionally. So nobody would actually, not that they wouldn't do it to me, they just like wouldn't do it, you know, because I just couldn't imagine that somebody could be horrible and wicked, you know. But and this would send me into a bit of, like a period of fixating on when that's going to happen. So you end up projecting into the future and living in the future when you're going to go on your date, and then you're going to have a date next week, and you're going to have a phone call, and maybe you've been dating for 2 weeks, and they said, okay, in the third week, do you want to whatever go to the art gallery, want to go to the petting zoo, and you're just thinking, okay, so I look forward to that, and then it never comes, and then you can't, because you've invested so much mental energy, you can't detach very easily because you've invested some of yourself, and you hang around waiting for a return on your investment only for it to never come. So it's very frustrating. All right. So there's obviously, many causes, da da da. But ultimately, I would say if you have really high self esteem, faith in yourself, confidence, certainty, then those things really help. They're very healing. And another thing is just generally being really goal oriented. I know that sounds kind of cutting, but to be truthful, if your goal, let's say, is to get to know someone or be in a relationship, it doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter a lick if someone calls you or not. It doesn't even matter if someone ghosts you. It's actually a blessing. It doesn't matter if someone cuts you loose or dumps you, because they're not going to help you reach your goal. So they've actually made it easier. They've removed themselves as an obstacle to your desire, right? So when you start thinking of it like that, things just flow a lot more smoothly, if that makes sense. And I know that without practice, it's not, easily applicable. It's a lot like easier said than done, especially when you're maybe like younger, or you're like I was a very sensitive person. People obviously say that's a big problem for you. Like you're very sensitive, but it does help things just kind of move along a lot quicker when you're thinking like, okay, a friend of mine called me yesterday. She wants to get married. And she says, my rule is if a guy wants to take me on a date, he has to call me first, because I can like feel on the phone if we click, if there's anything that bubbles there. So if there isn't, there's no point, So in 5 minutes, you can save yourself a horrible 5-hour date or something, right? And so some guy she's speaking to, she quite likes him. And she gave him her number, and she said, I want to talk before we meet because whatever. And he's like, sure. And he hadn't called in 24 hours. And so she just went, well, then no, because if you're too much of a coward to call someone just to talk, then how are you going to be a husband and father? There was other things in there as well. Like, I don't want people to be like, there's so much context missing. Like, listen, she's right. Okay. Anyway, so just kind of have an unshakable goal and faith in yourself, and it's true what everyone says, just know yourself, invest in yourself, do things for yourself, and that helps things kind of just not bug you so much. Now, in terms of astrology, because you did ask about astrology, yes, there's things that we can factor in. Okay, there's several things, so it helps to know a little bit. So moon is really important. If moon is imbalanced or heavily affected, then the person can just be really, really rigid. So let's say, for example, Moon Saturn people can be emotionally starved, and they're generally not very emotionally nourished people. They can't even soothe themselves and care for themselves. So if they have low self-esteem, or nobody really invested in them emotionally growing up, then they can really latch on to people, in the hopes or in the promise that that person will nourish them in the future, right? So, they think, okay, we've been going out for like 6 weeks, or we've been on 6 dates. You're like, I get my fix from you, and I've been like, I put my hopes into this working out. So that can be one example. Now, in terms of full-blown obsessive, Rahu is obsession. So the North Node is obsession. So if the North Node is with the moon, And that can make you obsessive. If the North Node is in the seventh house, that can make you obsessive. And actually, North Node in the seventh house also encourages a sense of urgency and impatience. So people want to latch onto relationships. It's not good. You know, you if you see North Node in the seventh house, you have to tell that person the more you desire something, you become over desirous, the less likely it is to come. Like literally, just forget it. Just forget it as best as you can. Okay. Other things to think about could be just signs in general. Taurus is the sign of acquisition, of wanting. And I have known Taurus people can be quite loyal, but I've known several Taurus people who will just, get into a relationship and then train the person to be how they want them to be. And then even if they're not good for them, even if they're not good to them, even if they don't even make sense, honestly, they're on different paths and they're not even compatible. They're just like, nope, they're not. No, I'm not like letting them go. Like I've known two Taurus people who the person's tried to break up with them and they're like, no, 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 just no. It's like, why? Just let it go, you know? So that could be, and another one is Scorpio, which is possession and possessiveness. Okay, so that can also be quite obsessive. So something like Venus in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio as well. Moon in the eighth house as well can be very, very possessive, very obsessive as well. And then Rahu in the eighth house, but that can just be a good researcher or like me, like I'm a collector of things. Like I just like to collect things. So once you start collecting things, there's no logical reason to actually stop. Like you can't convince a collector to stop doing it. It doesn't make sense to them. It's like a socially acceptable form of hoarding. It doesn't like really, like why would you do that? That's weird. So those are the things to consider. Another one too is if you are a target of such things. So if you are a target of such things, some people can be both. So if you have a particular nakshatra, okay, the nakshatra Mrigashira is one where people tend to receive attention from others they can't really get rid of. So I did, at a social setting, I did a chart for a gentleman about 3 weeks ago who really had no gain. He wasn't suave. I roasted him mercilessly. And I said, do you struggle to break up with women? Because he had Venus in Mrigashira. And I said, if you try to break up with them, they're actually like, nope, just anyway, lunch tomorrow. And his cousin looked up and she's like, oh my God, I swear he's had half of his girlfriends. Like they just won't leave. Like they won't go. Like they call him years later, they stalk him, like, So that's possible. Another one can be your ascendant because it's you. Another one can be the moon. And it can also be your midheaven because it's the most visible point in the chart. So if you have that, then people can just kind of by your image take a liking to you, and they just sort of like find you, like creepy things like that happened to me at work. We had to wear like badges with our full names, which I didn't really like because people who would come into my former employment were like creepy, some of them, but all walks of life. I guess some of them heard me talk smack, and also had an itch, so that was perfect timing. And I remember one of them, just as I kind of was thinking about that, I was just sort of like, see, I manifest the stupidest things. Good Lord, I shouldn't affirm that, but honestly, um, I went home like a couple days later to find a friend request on Facebook. This was a long time ago, and people were like on Facebook. I don't even think that Instagram existed or something. And they even messaged me saying that, and it's just really inappropriate. Like if you knew where I work, that's just like very unethical. And yeah, like they don't work there. They were like passing through as like, it was so weird. And I thought that's just so weird. Like asking me out that way is just so freaking creepy. But stuff like that happens, or I don't know, someone comes up to you in the street and then remembers what bus stop you take and then just kind of waits for you at that bus stop. Like actually, so that's very Mrigashira, okay? Like it's the symbol of the deer, and like it always makes me think of like the deer stalker hat. but like the deers get stalked, by their prey. So think of it like that. And like a deer, you have to dart around really, really quickly to like get away from them. Okay. So somebody I read for last month also had something in Mrigashira. I think it was Venus in the sixth house. And I said, love life looks good, money looks really good, business looks good, health looks good, da, 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 all the regular stuff. And then I just randomly said, when you worked in like settings, like with hierarchies, like companies, okay, because when you didn't work for yourself, were there problems with women at your job who wanted to be like you, or just wanted to be around you too much, or copy you and all these things? Like, you just, even when you stopped working there, you couldn't distance yourself from them. It's like an unhealthy obsession. And the sixth house is competition and accusation. So it's almost like if you try to put some distance between you and them, that they would become wicked. They would become offended and accuse you of something, or start gossiping and being quite, malicious and evil doing and things like that. I say, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. I had to leave so many jobs. I've left like 3 jobs because these women would do these things to me. And I thought, yeah, that's like really weird. So look for that. So if you're being limerenced, if you're being stalked, look for Mrigashira. Otherwise, obsession is Rahu. So if you suffer from limerence, look at if you have moon with Rahu, moon with Saturn, moon in the eighth house, um, Rahu in the seventh house, basically things like that. Okay. Scorpio and Taurus are signs of acquisition and possession. Really heavy eighth and second house placements can also, depending on what, like not necessarily limerence itself, but like somebody could have eighth lord in the second and be obsessed with acquiring money and can make a lot of it or something like that. And sometimes I've seen that, maybe with something like, their Lugna Lord, their ascendant ruler, and they're obsessed with their life and prolonging life and their own endurance or things like that. So it just really depends how you break it down. But those are the things that I wanted to mention. I'm sure there was a few more. I mean, it is a new moon, so go do something for that and enjoy. I will see you on Patreon for the deep dive into Vishaka. I will see you back here very, very shortly in a few days' time for a super, super duper special video on a super cool occurrence this month. And stay safe out there and enjoy. I love November. It's such a good month of the year. So, I mean, yes, enjoy, and I'll see you. Thank you so much for all your love on TikTok and Instagram. Remember, on Fridays, I do 5-minute Fridays. So one person through Instagram can get a free 5-minute reading through me. If I don't post that on a Friday, then that's because I'm going live doing $5 Friday. So we can do that instead. All right. So thank you so much, and I'll see you until next time. What new moon should do Gemini? What should the Gemini sign do on the new moon? Is that what you mean? Sorry, we just got a question. Like today for the new moon? So you're a Gemini rising. If you're a Gemini rising, then it's going to be in your sixth house of health, is it not? And I would be, you are, okay. I would be concerned with financial stability because it's the second lord debilitated in the sixth. And the sixth is a ledger system. So it's things like paying things back, borrowing, and debts in general. And in terms of health, then something to do with like your voice or your thyroid, getting your mouth checked out, your neck, anything here. Okay. So that would be quite important. Regulation of diet. Your birthday is May 26th. I've known some people born that day. Okay, so you're an 8. Yeah, you'll be fine. You'll transform no matter what. Okay, so go take care of your money then if you're an 8 day. And yeah, thank you all so much. So $5 Friday or free 5-minute Friday is coming up. And yeah, have a good month. Thank you for following me on TikTok and watching me here. I'm just battling a little cold, so I'm trying to like preserve my energy. And until next time, I love you. Bye.